Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here, and today we are talking about Tesla stock price as well as some new information on the longer range Made in China Model 3s. So obviously a huge day for the stock today, finishing up 13.6% to $650.95, and the rise has continued after hours right now up to $674.50. So up another $23 or so, meaning for the day Tesla has risen over $100 per share. I had a friend text me just after market close today asking the question that I think is on everybody's mind right now, and it was WTF is going on with Tesla? Well, I wish I had a better answer for that. There are some reasons that we'll talk about here, but even with all these reasons happening, I wouldn't have been surprised if the stock was just flat. So I think, though there are some reasons here that we'll talk about, I really think it's grasping for an explanation, and we're really only accounting these as reasons for a rise because there was a rise today. I think it's always helpful to start off with the macro environment. So the NASDAQ was up about 0.5% today, obviously way lower than Tesla stock, but the NASDAQ did outperform. Tech stocks in general did outperform other indices. The S&P 500, Dow Jones, NYSE, all down about 1% to 1.5% or so. And then you've also got pretty big increases on stocks like Amazon up 6%, Netflix up 7%. Not as big of increases as Tesla, obviously, but still pretty significant increases for a single day. And that starts to paint a picture of maybe this was a group of stocks that are seen as outperformers that rose significantly today rather than something that is just specific to Tesla, though we will get to those Tesla specific things in a second. Rounding out the context though, it definitely wasn't an automotive move today, with GM, Fiat Chrysler, Ford all being down 2 to 4%. Thinking individually about Tesla then, the move today I think was very reminiscent of what we saw back in January and February, where we just have these pretty significant gaps up without a whole lot of reason, or I guess more precisely, a whole lot of reason on that individual day. And I would have to go back and check this to see if it actually plays out in the actual stock performance data, but just from memory, it seemed like Mondays were really strong during that period of time, essentially as those rallies kind of played out over the weekend without any trading, of course, and then Monday seemed to sort of spike up to make up for that a little bit. I kind of feel like that's what we're seeing today after the strong performance on Thursday, carrying into after hours on Thursday, and then especially so because of the long weekend today. A lot of time to think about that, look at the technical analysis, which Oppenheimer actually just put out a note saying that that was strong. That was on Thursday, and that was alongside their $684 price target. That note seemed to get a lot of media attention today as people looked for reasons behind this rise. So I really see this as more of a continuation off of last week's news rather than anything that really was new today. There's been more time to understand what that production restart date on May 4th might mean for Tesla's output for this year. That's removed some uncertainty, though that still remains, as we talked about. And then, of course, late last week, we saw the China numbers come out. That probably wasn't fully captured in the stock yet last week. That production number of 10,000 for March is really strong. Already, Tesla's showing a greater than 100,000 annual run rate. And that's just 15 months after breaking ground on Gigafactory Shanghai and only about 4 months after starting production. That demonstrates really strong fundamental progress that people would have had time this weekend to contemplate. And it also gets people excited about what Tesla can do from Gigafactory Shanghai going forward. If they can go from 0 to 100,000 run rate in 4 months, how long is it going to take them to go from 100,000 to 200,000 or 200,000 to 300,000? And then how repeatable is that process for Gigafactory Berlin? I think that's something that's getting the market a little bit more excited right now. And then of course you have more news coming out about the Model Y. You're starting to see early reviews, most of which have been extremely positive thus far, as well as of course the ongoing teardown from Monroe. He's had a lot of positive things to say, particularly around manufacturability, which implies good margins and good outlook for production. And Tesla also has technically underperformed the market, so we do have a little bit farther of a way to climb back from peak than the overall markets do. So I think some combination of all of those things, and then maybe even some continued rally from the Q1 delivery and production report, though I didn't really necessarily expect a sustained rally off of that based on the lack of forward-looking information. But a couple things to consider. Number one, Tesla didn't actually lower guidance when they had the opportunity to in that report. And since then, a couple of those gaps in forward-looking information have been filled in with that May 4th production restart date target and the production information out of China. The only other thing I can think of is maybe the market is starting to put some of the pieces together of how this actually improves Tesla's competitive advantage versus other automakers, as the whole macro situation is very likely to slow down the development programs from those other automakers for electric vehicles. Lastly, on the stock, whenever we see a big rise like this, especially over multiple days, it could signal the accumulation from a bigger fund, something like that. So those are pretty much my thoughts on the stock price, but definitely let me know in the comments if you have other ideas. Now we'll move into the news, the biggest of which was Tesla officially releasing the Made in China long-range Model 3 and the performance variant for sale in China. As we talked about last week, the range for the long-range variant is listed at 668 kilometers. That would convert to 415 miles, but as we talked about last week, China uses a different test cycle than the EPA, which is a little bit more accurate to real-world range. And as we talked about last week, based on the conversion between the dual-motor all-wheel drive in China and the US, if we convert at that same ratio, which I think is probably our best benchmark, though it would probably vary to some extent, we would expect the EPA range on this new Model 3 to be about 365 miles. So for the lineup for the Model 3 in China, you now have the Standard Range Plus at 299,000 yuan after subsidies, the Long Range Single Motor at 339,000 yuan after subsidies, and the Performance at 420,000 yuan, also after subsidies. So these are all domestically made in China. No longer is Tesla offering the imported Model 3s, though the estimated delivery date for the Performance is still a ways out, not until 2021. Converting yuan to US dollars, that lineup starts at 42,400 for the SR Plus, 48,100 for the long-range single motor, and then 59,500 for the Performance. Clean Technica is reporting some pretty interesting information on the long-range Model 3. They're saying that the cells for the long-range Model 3 in China will be made by LG Chem, and they'll be assembled at Gigafactory Shanghai with module and pack parts shipped from Nevada. So not entirely localized to China yet, but making progress in that direction. And interestingly, Clean Technica is also saying that these cells from LG Chem use a new chemistry. Technically they said quote-unquote formula, but I assume from that they mean chemistry. And they're saying this allows for a little bit more capacity for the Model 3 than the Panasonic cells that Tesla would otherwise use. Clean Technica is also reporting that Panasonic is working on changing their chemistry to this new chemistry at some point, and actually said they've been working on that for a while, I think since January. So when that is completed, it should also provide a slight boost to range for the domestic US vehicles. Last couple of things here, if you missed it, Tesla did add a Model Y tow hitch option to the design studio. That's a $1,000 option for the Model Y, and they list the tow limit as 3,500 pounds. I know a lot of people are excited to see that. It should also serve to boost average selling prices a bit, and I would imagine at a pretty decent margin. And then on the towing capacity, it seems okay. That'll get a lot of jobs done, but seems to fall a little bit short of what competitors offer. For example, the Porsche Macan has a tow capacity of about 5,300 pounds, the BMW X3 at about 4,400 pounds, same as the Audi Q5. Nevertheless, nice to see the option. Then looking at Elon's tweets, there have been a few over the weekend. The most important and notable one probably around full self-driving. Somebody asked, quote, how long for the first robotaxi release/deployment? 2023? And Elon said, quote, functionality still looking good for this year. Regulatory approval is the big unknown, end quote. Not much to add to that. We're just going to have to wait and see. Obviously, Elon feeling pretty confident now that they have that rewrite close to being in place. That'll wrap it up for today, though. As always, thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up for notifications. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Tesla Podcast. And I'll see you tomorrow for the Tuesday, April 14th episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.